This training is provided by SafeShield. We're a professional training provider that specializes in cybersecurity, compliance, risk management, and AI governance. Our goal is to give professionals the knowledge and skills required to advance their careers and get ahead of the competition. This free course is part of that goal. We want to make trusted, high-quality education accessible and to support the development of responsible practices in new and emerging fields such as AI governance. The European Union Artificial Intelligence Act, commonly referred to as the EU AI Act, represents the first comprehensive and binding legal framework dedicated specifically to artificial intelligence. Its purpose is to regulate how AI systems are developed, placed on a market, and used within the European Union, while safeguarding fundamental rights, public safety, and societal values. This regulation reflects the EU's long-standing approach to technology governance, which emphasizes risk management, accountability, and harmonized market rules rather than voluntary guidelines. The AI Act applies across industries and technologies, covering traditional rule-based AI systems, as well as advanced machine learning and foundation models. It introduces clear legal obligations for organizations involved in the AI value chain, including providers, deployers, importers, and distributors. These obligations vary depending on the risk profile of the AI system, ensuring that regulatory burden remains proportionate to potential harm. This session focuses on building a practical understanding of the AI Act rather than providing a legal interpretation. Attention is placed on how organizations can operationalize compliance through governance structures, risk management processes, and technical controls. The regulation does not exist in isolation. It aligns closely with international standards such as ISO IEC 42001 for artificial intelligence management systems and the NIST AI risk management framework. Understanding these connections enables organizations to design compliance programs that are efficient, auditable, and scalable. By the end of this session, participants will understand why the EU AI Act was introduced, how it is structured, which AI systems fall under its scope, and what concrete actions organizations must take to comply. This foundation supports informed decision-making for executives, compliance professionals, and technical leaders responsible for AI governance. Artificial intelligence adoption across Europe accelerated faster than regulatory and governance mechanisms could mature. AI systems increasingly influence employment decisions, access to financial services, healthcare outcomes, public safety, and information ecosystems. These developments created growing concern around bias, lack of transparency, safety failures, and misuse of AI technologies. The EU AI Act emerged as a response to these systemic risks rather than isolated incidents. European policymakers identified fragmentation as a critical challenge. Prior to the AI Act, AI governance relied on a patchwork of national laws, sector-specific rules, and voluntary ethical guidelines. This fragmentation created uncertainty for organizations operating across borders and weakened enforcement consistency. A harmonized regulation was seen as necessary to preserve the EU single market while ensuring a common level of protection for individuals and society. Another key driver was alignment with existing EU values and legal principles. Fundamental rights enshrined in the EU Charter, such as human dignity, non-discrimination, and privacy, required explicit protection in the context of automated decision-making. The AI Act translates these abstract rights into concrete technical and organizational obligations that could be assessed and enforced. Economic competitiveness also played a role. The EU sought to create legal certainty for AI innovation by clarifying what is permitted, what is restricted, and what is prohibited. Clear rules were intended to foster trust in AI technologies, encouraging adoption by organizations and acceptance by the public. Trust was treated as an enabler of innovation rather than a constraint. The result is a regulation that balances innovation and risk management. It does not attempt to regulate AI as a single category, but instead targets specific uses and impacts, ensuring proportionality and long-term sustainability of the European AI ecosystem. The EU AI Act applies broadly, both in terms of technologies covered and organizations subject to its requirements. Its scope includes AI systems developed, marketed, or used within the European Union, regardless of whether the provider is established inside or outside the EU. This extraterritorial reach mirrors the approach taken by the General Data Protection Regulation and reflects the global nature of AI supply chains. Organizations based outside the EU fall under the AI Act when their AI systems are placed on the EU market or when the outputs of those systems are used within the EU. For example, an AI system developed in North America but used to assess job applicants in Europe would be subject to the regulation. This approach ensures that protections apply consistently to individuals in the EU, regardless of where the technology originates. The Act covers a wide range of AI systems, including standalone software, embedded AI in physical products, and general-purpose AI models that can be adapted for multiple downstream uses. Both commercial and public sector deployments are included. However, certain exclusions exist, such as AI systems developed exclusively for military or national security purposes, which remain outside the scope of EU civilian regulation. The regulation distinguishes between roles in the AI value chain. Providers develop or place AI systems on the market. Deployers use AI systems under their authority. Importers and distributors play intermediary roles. Each role carries distinct responsibilities, ensuring accountability is distributed rather than concentrated solely on developers. Understanding scope is critical for compliance planning. Many organizations initially underestimate their exposure, assuming the AI Act applies only to technology companies. In practice, any organization using AI systems in regulated contexts must assess applicability and implement appropriate governance controls. Clear definitions form the foundation of the EU AI Act. The regulation adopts a broad and technology-neutral definition of artificial intelligence, covering systems designed to operate with varying degrees of autonomy and generate outputs such as predictions, recommendations, or decisions that influence environments or individuals. This definition ensures future-proofing as AI technologies evolve. An AI system is not limited to machine learning models. Rule-based systems, statistical approaches, and hybrid techniques fall within scope when they meet the functional criteria defined by the Act. This avoids regulatory loopholes based on technical implementation choices rather than actual impact. The Act also defines general-purpose AI models, referring to models trained on large and diverse datasets that can be adapted for a wide range of tasks. These models introduce systemic risks due to their scale and reuse across sectors, which is why the regulation introduces dedicated obligations for them. High-risk AI systems are defined through a combination of intended purpose and deployment context. The classification is not based on technical complexity alone, but on the potential impact on health, safety, and fundamental rights. This aligns with risk-based governance principles found in ISO 31000 and ISO 23894. Other key definitions include biometric identification, emotion recognition, profiling, and real-time versus post-event processing. These terms are defined precisely to reduce ambiguity during enforcement and conformity assessments. For organizations, understanding these definitions is essential. Misclassification often leads to compliance gaps, incorrect assumptions about obligations, or over-engineering controls where they are not required. A structured interpretation process should therefore be part of AI governance activities. The EU AI Act is structured around a risk-based regulatory model. This approach recognizes that not all AI systems pose the same level of risk and therefore should not be subject to identical regulatory obligations. Risk is assessed primarily based on potential harm to individuals, society, and fundamental rights. At the highest level, the Act defines 4 broad risk categories: unacceptable risk, high risk, limited risk, and minimal risk. Each category corresponds to a different regulatory treatment, ranging from outright prohibition to minimal or no additional obligations. Unacceptable risk AI systems are banned because their use is considered fundamentally incompatible with EU values. These systems pose systemic threats that cannot be adequately mitigated through controls or oversight. The prohibition reflects a precautionary principle applied to specific practices rather than to AI as a whole. High-risk AI systems are permitted but tightly regulated. They are subject to extensive pre-market and post-market obligations, including risk management, data governance, technical documentation, human oversight, and monitoring. These systems typically operate in sensitive domains such as employment, creditworthiness, education, healthcare, and law enforcement. Limited risk AI systems are subject primarily to transparency obligations. Users must be informed when interacting with AI, enabling informed decision-making without imposing heavy compliance burdens. Minimal risk AI systems, which represent the majority of current applications, remain largely unregulated under the Act. Voluntary codes of conduct are encouraged but not mandated. This tiered structure allows regulators to focus resources where risks are greatest while supporting innovation in low-risk areas. The AI Act explicitly prohibits certain AI practices classified as posing unacceptable risk. These prohibitions apply regardless of safeguards, oversight mechanisms, or claim benefits. The underlying rationale is that some uses of AI undermine fundamental rights in ways that cannot be proportionately mitigated. One category of prohibited practices includes AI systems that use manipulative or deceptive techniques to distort human behavior in ways that cause harm. This includes exploiting vulnerabilities related to age, disability, or socioeconomic circumstances. The concern is that such systems bypass human autonomy rather than supporting informed choice. Another prohibited area involves social scoring by public authorities, where individuals are evaluated or classified based on behavior or characteristics unrelated to the context of the assessment. This practice risks discrimination, exclusion, and erosion of trust in public institutions. Certain biometric identification practices are also restricted. Real-time remote biometric identification in public spaces for law enforcement purposes is generally prohibited, with narrowly defined exceptions subject to strict authorization and safeguards. These restrictions reflect the high intrusion risk associated with pervasive surveillance technologies. Emotion recognition systems used in workplaces or educational institutions are similarly constrained, given the lack of scientific consensus and the potential for misuse and misinterpretation. Organizations must ensure that prohibited practices are identified early during AI system design and procurement. Governance frameworks should include explicit screening mechanisms to prevent deployment of banned use cases. Relying solely on technical teams without legal and ethical review significantly increases compliance risk. High-risk AI systems occupy the central regulatory focus of the EU AI Act. These systems are permitted but subject to stringent obligations due to their potential to significantly affect individuals' rights, opportunities, or safety. Classification as high risk depends on both the intended purpose of the system and the domain in which it is deployed. The Act identifies two main categories of high-risk AI systems. The first includes AI systems that are safety components of regulated products, such as medical devices or machinery. The second includes standalone AI systems used in specific sensitive areas listed in Annex 3 of the regulation. Examples include AI systems used for recruitment and worker management, creditworthiness assessment, access to education, biometric identification, migration management, and law enforcement support. These contexts share a common characteristic. AI outputs can lead to legally or socially significant consequences for individuals. High-risk classification triggers mandatory compliance activities before the system is placed on the market or put into service. These activities include establishing a documented risk management system, ensuring high-quality training and testing data, implementing human oversight measures, and preparing technical documentation for conformity assessment. High-risk systems are not static. Changes to system purpose, deployment context, or underlying models can alter risk classification. Continuous monitoring and reassessment are therefore essential elements of compliance. Organizations often underestimate the operational impact of high-risk classification. Compliance is not a one-time certification exercise, but an ongoing governance obligation that requires coordination between legal, technical, and business functions. Risk management is a core obligation for high-risk AI systems under the EU AI Act. Providers must establish, implement, document, and maintain a continuous risk management system throughout the AI system's lifecycle. This requirement aligns closely with established risk management standards such as ISO 31000 and ISO 23894. The process begins with systematic identification of known and foreseeable risks associated with the intended purpose of the AI system. Risks include potential harm to health, safety, fundamental rights, and societal interests. Identification must consider reasonably foreseeable misuse, not just intended use. Once risks are identified, appropriate risk mitigation measures must be designed and implemented. These measures may include technical safeguards, organizational controls, human oversight mechanisms, and user instructions. Mitigation efforts should aim to reduce risks to an acceptable level, consistent with the system's intended purpose. Residual risks must be evaluated and documented. If risks remain unacceptable, the system should not be placed on the market or put into service. This decision must be supported by evidence rather than assumptions about user behavior. Risk management does not end at deployment. Post-market monitoring is required to detect emerging risks, performance degradation, or unintended impacts. Feedback loops must be established to trigger corrective actions when necessary. For organizations familiar with ISO 42001, these requirements align naturally with AI management system practices. Integrating AI risk management into existing governance structures reduces duplication and supports auditability. High-risk AI systems must comply with strict data governance and data quality requirements. These obligations address one of the most significant sources of AI risk: biased, incomplete, or unrepresentative data. The AI Act does not mandate specific datasets, but requires documented processes that ensure data suitability for the intended purpose. Training, validation, and testing datasets must be relevant, representative, sufficiently large, and appropriate for the context in which the AI system is used. Data collection and pre-processing activities must be documented, including sources, selection criteria, and known limitations. Special attention is required when datasets contain personal data or sensitive attributes. Compliance with data protection regulations, including GDPR, remains mandatory. The AI Act complements rather than replaces existing privacy obligations. Bias mitigation is a central objective. Providers must assess potential biases that could lead to discriminatory outcomes and implement measures to detect and reduce them. This includes statistical analysis, fairness testing, and ongoing performance evaluation across different population groups. Data governance responsibilities extend beyond development. Changes to data sources, labeling practices, or pre-processing techniques can materially affect system behavior and risk profile. Governance frameworks must therefore include change management controls. Organizations often struggle with data traceability. The AI Act effectively requires organizations to answer fundamental questions about where data comes from, how it was processed, and why it is appropriate. Strong data governance is therefore a prerequisite for sustainable AI compliance. Technical documentation is a cornerstone of AI Act compliance for high-risk AI systems. Providers must prepare and maintain comprehensive documentation demonstrating conformity with regulatory requirements. This documentation supports conformity assessments, regulatory oversight, and internal accountability. The documentation must describe the AI system's intended purpose, design specifications, system architecture, and underlying models or algorithms. It should explain how the system functions, what inputs it processes and what outputs it generates. Explanations must be sufficiently detailed to enable competent authorities to assess compliance. Risk management activities must be documented, including identified risks, mitigation measures, and residual risk assessments. Data governance practices, bias mitigation strategies, and performance metrics must also be recorded. Record-keeping obligations extend to system operation. Logs must be generated to enable traceability of decisions, outputs, and system behavior over time. These logs support incident investigation, post-market monitoring, and user complaints handling. Documentation is not static. It must be updated whenever material changes occur, such as model updates, retraining, or changes in deployment context. Outdated documentation is treated as non-compliance, even if the system itself functions correctly. For organizations with mature management systems, these requirements align well with document control and records management practices. Leveraging existing ISMS or AIMS documentation frameworks reduces compliance overhead and improves consistency. Transparency is a key principle of the EU AI Act, particularly for high-risk and limited-risk AI systems. The regulation requires that users receive clear and appropriate information about AI system capabilities, limitations, and intended use. Transparency supports informed decision-making and effective human oversight. For high-risk AI systems, providers must supply detailed instructions for use. These instructions should describe system functionality, performance characteristics, accuracy levels, and known limitations. Users must understand under what conditions the system performs reliably and when caution is required. Deployers have responsibilities as well. They must ensure that AI systems are used in accordance with provider instructions and that relevant information is communicated to affected individuals when required by law. Limited-risk AI systems are subject to specific transparency obligations, such as informing individuals when they're interacting with an AI system, a chatbot, or synthetic media. The objective is not to discourage use, but to prevent deception and confusion. Transparency does not require disclosure of trade secrets or proprietary algorithms. Instead, it focuses on meaningful information that enables appropriate use and oversight. This distinction is important for balancing innovation with accountability. Organizations should treat transparency as a design requirement rather than an afterthought. Clear communication materials, user training, and interface design all contribute to effective compliance and risk reduction. Human oversight is a mandatory requirement for high-risk AI systems under the EU AI Act. The objective is to ensure that AI systems support human decision-making rather than replace it in contexts where significant harm could occur. Oversight mechanisms must be appropriate to the system's purpose and risk profile. Human oversight can take different forms. It may involve real-time intervention, the ability to override or stop system outputs, or periodic review of system performance. The regulation does not prescribe a single model, but requires that oversight be effective and documented. Oversight personnel must be appropriately trained. They need to understand system capabilities, limitations, and failure modes. Assigning oversight responsibilities to individuals without relevant competence undermines compliance and increases liability exposure. The design of the AI system should facilitate oversight. Interfaces should present outputs in a way that supports human understanding rather than obscuring decision logic. Alerts and thresholds should be configured to flag anomalous behavior or high-risk outcomes. Human oversight does not eliminate responsibility. Organizations remain accountable for decisions influenced by AI systems. Oversight mechanisms should therefore be integrated into governance and accountability structures rather than treated as informal safeguards. From a management systems perspective, human oversight aligns closely with control activities and segregation of duties. When implemented systematically, it strengthens trust in AI-enabled processes. High-risk AI systems must meet requirements related to accuracy, robustness, and cybersecurity. These requirements address technical reliability and resilience, ensuring that AI systems perform consistently and safely under foreseeable conditions. Accuracy metrics must be appropriate to the system's intended purpose. Providers are required to define, measure, and document performance levels, including known limitations. Accuracy claims must be realistic and supported by evidence rather than marketing assertions. Robustness refers to the system's ability to handle errors, unexpected inputs, and changing conditions without producing harmful outcomes. This includes resistance to data drift, model degradation, and edge case scenarios. Cybersecurity obligations focus on protecting AI systems from unauthorized access, manipulation, and attacks. This includes securing training data, models, and deployment environments. Adversarial attacks, such as data poisoning or model extraction, must be considered as part of risk management. Incident response capabilities are essential. Organizations must be able to detect, respond to, and recover from security or performance incidents affecting AI systems. Lessons learned should feed into continual improvement processes. These requirements align closely with information security and operational resilience frameworks. Integrating AI systems into existing cybersecurity programs reduces fragmentation and supports consistent risk treatment across digital assets. Post-market monitoring is a critical element of AI Act compliance for high-risk AI systems. Providers must establish processes to continuously collect, document, and analyze information about system performance after deployment. This ensures that risks remain controlled over time. Monitoring activities should detect emerging risks, unintended consequences, and deviations from expected performance. This includes monitoring accuracy, bias indicators, and system behavior in real-world conditions. Feedback from users, incidents, complaints, and near misses must be systematically analyzed. Organizations should avoid reactive approaches that address issues only after harm occurs. Proactive monitoring supports early intervention. When serious incidents or malfunctioning occur, providers and deployers have reporting obligations to competent authorities. Timely and accurate reporting is essential to demonstrate accountability and cooperation with regulators. Post-market monitoring is not limited to technical metrics. Organizational factors, such as changes in user behavior or deployment context, can alter risk profiles and must be considered. From a governance perspective, post-market monitoring supports continual improvement and management review activities. Organizations with mature monitoring practices will find it easier to adapt to regulatory expectations and evolving AI risks. Conformity assessment is the formal process through which providers of high-risk AI systems demonstrate compliance with the EU AI Act before placing a system on the market or putting it into service. This process establishes regulatory confidence that the system meets all applicable requirements related to risk management, data governance, transparency, human oversight, and technical robustness. For many high-risk AI systems, conformity assessment can be conducted internally by the provider, provided that all required documentation, controls, and evidence are in place. In specific cases, particularly where AI systems are integrated into regulated products such as medical devices or machinery, the involvement of a notified body may be required. The applicable assessment path depends on the system category and its regulatory context. Technical documentation plays a central role in conformity assessment. Risk management records, data quality documentation, performance metrics, and post-market monitoring plans must be complete, accurate, and internally consistent. Gaps in documentation frequently represent the primary cause of assessment delays or non-compliance findings. Successful conformity assessment allows the AI system to bear the CE marking. This marking signals compliance with EU regulatory requirements, but does not represent a one-time approval. Ongoing obligations remain in force throughout the system lifecycle, including monitoring, incident reporting, and change management. Organizations benefit from integrating conformity assessment activities into product development and governance processes. Early alignment reduces rework, supports audit readiness, and ensures that regulatory compliance becomes a predictable operational capability rather than a last-minute hurdle. Deployers play a critical role in the effective governance of AI systems under the EU AI Act. While providers are responsible for system design and development, deployers control how AI systems are used in real-world operational environments. The regulation assigns specific obligations to deployers to ensure that AI systems are applied responsibly and within defined limits. A primary obligation for deployers involves using AI systems in accordance with the provider's instructions and declared intended purpose. Deviations from intended use can introduce new risks and invalidate conformity assumptions made during system assessment. Clear internal procedures and user training help prevent unintended misuse. Deployers are responsible for monitoring system performance during operation, particularly for high-risk AI systems. This includes observing outputs, detecting anomalies, and identifying potential adverse impacts on individuals or processes. When issues arise, deployers must take corrective action and cooperate with providers. Transparency obligations may also apply. In certain contexts, deployers must inform affected individuals that AI systems are being used, enabling awareness and appropriate recourse where applicable. Incident handling represents another deployer responsibility. Serious incidents or malfunctions must be documented and communicated to providers and authorities as required. Effective escalation and reporting processes support regulatory compliance and risk mitigation. Strong deployer governance requires clear accountability, defined roles, and integration with broader risk and compliance functions. Treating AI deployment as a controlled operational activity rather than a purely technical task significantly reduces compliance exposure. General-purpose AI models introduce distinct regulatory considerations due to their broad applicability and scale. These models are designed to perform a wide range of tasks and are often reused across multiple downstream applications, increasing the potential for systemic risk. The EU AI Act addresses this challenge through dedicated obligations for general-purpose AI providers. Providers of general-purpose AI models must maintain detailed technical documentation describing model architecture, training processes, and intended capabilities. Transparency regarding training, compute, and data sources supports risk assessment and regulatory oversight. These requirements recognize that downstream users rely on provider disclosures to manage application-level risks. Certain general-purpose AI models may be designated as posing systemic risk due to their computational scale or performance capabilities. These models are subject to additional obligations, including enhanced risk mitigation measures, ongoing evaluations, and cooperation with regulatory authorities. Downstream deployers remain accountable for how general-purpose models are integrated into specific use cases. When such models are used in high-risk contexts, application-level compliance obligations apply regardless of provider status. Responsibility is therefore shared across the AI value chain. Organizations should avoid assuming that use of a well-known foundation model automatically ensures compliance. Governance controls must address both model-level and application-level risks. Structured oversight and contractual clarity between providers and deployers help manage shared responsibilities effectively. The EU AI Act operates within a broader European regulatory environment and does not replace existing legal frameworks. Data protection law, particularly the General Data Protection Regulation, remains fully applicable whenever AI systems process personal data. The AI Act adds AI-specific governance requirements rather than redefining privacy obligations. Compliance with the AI Act does not imply compliance with GDPR, and the reverse is equally true. An AI system may meet AI Act technical requirements while violating GDPR principles such as lawfulness, purpose limitation, or data minimization. Integrated compliance analysis is therefore essential. Other EU legal instruments also apply. Consumer protection law governs AI-enabled products and services offered to individuals. Product safety and liability frameworks address harm caused by defective systems. Sector-specific regulations continue to impose additional obligations in areas such as healthcare, finance, and transportation. Organizations benefit from coordinated governance structures that bring together AI governance, privacy management, information security, and legal compliance. Fragmented compliance efforts increase operational complexity and regulatory risk. Holistic compliance approaches enable organizations to reuse risk assessments, documentation, and monitoring outputs across regulatory domains. This integration improves efficiency and strengthens accountability when interacting with supervisory authorities. The EU AI Act establishes a layered enforcement and governance structure designed to ensure consistent application across all member states. National competent authorities are responsible for supervision, investigations, and enforcement within their jurisdictions. These authorities assess compliance, respond to complaints, and impose penalties where necessary. At the EU level, coordination mechanisms support harmonization. The European Artificial Intelligence Board facilitates cooperation among national authorities, promotes consistent interpretation of the regulation, and contributes to guidance development. This structure mirrors governance approaches already familiar from GDPR enforcement. A European AI office plays a central role in overseeing general-purpose AI models with systemic risk. Centralized supervision reflects the cross-border nature of large-scale AI models and the need for specialized expertise. The AI office has authority to request information and coordinate risk mitigation actions. Enforcement is expected to evolve as regulatory maturity increases. Early supervisory activity may emphasize guidance and corrective measures, particularly for organizations demonstrating structured compliance efforts. Over time, enforcement actions are likely to become more assertive. Organizations should prepare for regulatory engagement by maintaining clear documentation, defined accountability, and evidence of ongoing governance. Treating supervision as a routine aspect of compliance reduces uncertainty and strengthens regulatory trust. The EU AI Act introduces a graduated penalty regime designed to ensure compliance through deterrence and accountability. Administrative fines vary based on the nature of the infringement, the role of the organization within the AI value chain, and the severity of the violation. Maximum penalties can reach levels comparable to those established under the GDPR, making enforcement exposure a material business risk. The highest penalties apply to prohibited AI practices. Deployment of banned systems represents a direct violation of fundamental regulatory principles and attracts the most severe sanctions. Significant fines also apply to failures involving high-risk AI system obligations, including inadequate risk management, insufficient human oversight, or lack of required documentation. Lower-tier penalties apply to breaches of transparency obligations, reporting failures, or incomplete record-keeping. While these infringements may appear less severe, repeated or systemic failures can escalate enforcement actions and increase financial exposure. Financial penalties represent only part of the risk landscape. Authorities may require withdrawal of non-compliant AI systems from the market or suspension of their use. Such actions can disrupt operations, delay product launches, and affect contractual commitments. Civil liability risk must also be considered. Harm caused by AI systems may trigger claims under product liability or national tort law. Weak governance, poor documentation, and unclear accountability significantly reduce an organization's ability to demonstrate due diligence. Investment in structured compliance reduces both regulatory and liability exposure while supporting sustainable AI operations. The EU AI Act follows a phased implementation approach that spreads obligations over multiple years. This structure reflects the complexity of AI governance and provides organizations with time to adapt processes, systems, and controls. Understanding the timeline is essential for effective planning. ISO/IEC 42001 provides a management system framework that aligns closely with the intent and operational requirements of the EU AI Act. While the AI Act establishes legal obligations, ISO 42001 offers a structured method for implementing governance, risk management, and continual improvement practices. Core elements of the standard include leadership commitment, policy definition, risk assessment, operational controls, competence management, monitoring, and management review. These elements directly support AI Act requirements related to accountability, documentation, and lifecycle oversight. Risk management under ISO 42001 provides a systematic approach for identifying, assessing, and treating AI-related risks. This supports compliance with high-risk AI system obligations and post-market monitoring requirements. Document control and record management practices under the standard align with technical documentation and traceability expectations. Clear version control, approval workflows, and evidence retention improve audit readiness. Human oversight and competence requirements strengthen organizational capability to manage AI systems responsibly. Training and awareness activities reduce reliance on informal practices and individual discretion. Certification to ISO 42001 does not replace legal compliance with the AI Act. However, it provides strong evidence of structured governance and due diligence, supporting credibility during regulatory supervision and internal audits. The NIST AI Risk Management Framework provides practical guidance for managing AI risks throughout the system lifecycle. Although developed outside the European Union, the framework aligns closely with the risk-based principles embedded in the EU AI Act. The framework is structured around four core functions: governance, mapping, measurement, and management. Governance addresses roles, responsibilities, and accountability. Mapping focuses on understanding AI system context, stakeholders, and potential impacts. Measurement evaluates performance, bias, robustness, and reliability. Management guides risk treatment and continuous improvement. These functions support AI Act obligations related to risk identification, mitigation, monitoring, and documentation. Outputs such as risk registers, impact assessments, and performance reports can be reused as compliance evidence. The framework emphasizes iterative assessment rather than static compliance. This approach supports post-market monitoring and responsiveness to emerging risks. Integration with enterprise risk management and cybersecurity practices strengthens organizational resilience. AI risks are treated alongside other operational and strategic risks rather than in isolation. Using the NIST AI Risk Management Framework alongside ISO 42001 creates a complementary governance structure. Together, they translate regulatory requirements into operational practices that can be measured, audited, and continuously improved. Organizational readiness for the EU AI Act depends on governance maturity as much as technical capability. A structured readiness assessment provides clarity on current exposure, gaps, and priorities. The assessment begins with identifying and inventorying AI systems across the organization. Many AI capabilities are embedded within software tools or procured from third parties, making visibility a critical first step. Risk classification follows inventory development. Correctly identifying prohibited, high risk, limited risk, and minimal risk systems determines applicable obligations and timelines. Misclassification represents a common compliance failure. Governance structures must then be evaluated. Leadership oversight, defined roles, escalation paths, and accountability mechanisms should be assessed against regulatory expectations. Operational capabilities also require review. Risk management processes, data governance, documentation practices, and monitoring mechanisms must support lifecycle compliance. A readiness assessment should result in a prioritized action plan rather than a generic checklist. High-risk systems and prohibited practices require immediate attention, while lower-risk areas can follow a phased approach. Organizations that perform structured readiness assessments reduce uncertainty, allocate resources effectively, and avoid reactive compliance driven by enforcement pressure. An AI Act compliance roadmap translates regulatory obligations into structured, achievable actions aligned with organizational priorities. A well-designed roadmap reflects risk exposure, implementation timelines, and operational capacity rather than treating compliance as a one-time exercise. The roadmap typically begins with governance foundations. Clear ownership of AI governance, defined roles, internal policies, and escalation mechanisms establish the conditions for effective compliance. Without these foundations, technical controls and documentation efforts remain fragmented and difficult to sustain. Subsequent phases focus on AI system classification and prioritization. High-risk systems and prohibited practices demand immediate attention due to regulatory exposure and potential impact. Lower-risk systems can be addressed through lighter controls and later implementation phases. Implementation activities should then address lifecycle controls. Risk management processes, data governance practices, documentation frameworks, and human oversight mechanisms must be embedded into development, procurement, and deployment workflows. Integration reduces duplication and improves consistency. Training and awareness activities support roadmap execution. Personnel involved in AI design, deployment, and oversight must understand their responsibilities and decision boundaries. Competence gaps represent a significant source of compliance failure. A compliance roadmap should remain adaptive. Regulatory guidance, organizational strategy, and AI technologies evolve over time. Regular review and adjustment ensure that compliance efforts remain relevant, efficient, and aligned with business objectives. Early implementation experiences reveal recurring challenges in AI Act compliance. One common pitfall involves treating compliance as a legal documentation exercise detached from operational reality. Regulatory expectations require evidence of lived governance rather than formal policies alone. Documentation weaknesses represent another frequent issue. Incomplete risk assessments, inconsistent records, and outdated technical documentation undermine conformity assessments and regulatory credibility. Documentation quality often matters more than technical sophistication. Misclassification of AI systems also creates risk. Organizations may underestimate risk categories to reduce obligations, leading to exposure during audits or incidents. Conservative, evidence-based classification provides greater regulatory resilience. Post-market monitoring is often overlooked. Many organizations focus on pre-deployment activities and neglect ongoing performance observation, incident analysis, and feedback loops. This omission directly conflicts with explicit regulatory requirements. Fragmented accountability further complicates compliance. When responsibility for AI governance is spread across disconnected teams, gaps emerge between legal, technical, and business functions. Lessons learned from mature programs emphasize structured governance, cross-functional collaboration, and early engagement. Organizations that invest in these areas experience lower compliance costs, fewer disruptions, and more predictable regulatory outcomes. The EU AI Act reshapes how organizations approach AI strategy, procurement, and innovation. Compliant considerations increasingly influence technology choices, partner selection, and product design decisions. Organizations that embed trust, transparency, and accountability into AI systems gain strategic advantages. Customers, partners, and regulators increasingly expect demonstrable governance rather than aspirational ethics statements. Regulatory alignment supports market access and long-term scalability. Procurement processes evolve as AI compliance becomes a selection criterion. Vendors unable to demonstrate conformity, documentation quality, or governance maturity may be excluded from high-risk use cases. This shifts market dynamics toward responsible providers. Innovation strategies also adapt. Clear regulatory boundaries reduce uncertainty and enable responsible experimentation within defined limits. Teams can focus on value creation without navigating ambiguous legal risk. From a leadership perspective, AI governance becomes a board-level concern. Decisions about AI deployment affect regulatory exposure, reputation, and operational resilience. Organizations that treat the AI Act as a strategic framework rather than a constraint position themselves for sustainable growth. Governance capabilities become enablers of innovation rather than barriers to adoption. The EU AI Act establishes a comprehensive, risk-based regulatory framework for artificial intelligence that extends beyond Europe through its extraterritorial reach. Its impact spans governance, technology, operations, and strategy. Effective compliance depends on structured governance rather than isolated technical controls. Risk management, documentation, transparency, and oversight form the core pillars of regulatory alignment. Standards and frameworks, such as ISO 42001 and the NIST AI Risk Management Framework, provide practical mechanisms for operationalizing AI Act requirements. Alignment with these frameworks supports audit readiness and continuous improvement. Early preparation offers clear advantages. Organizations that assess readiness, build compliance roadmaps, and invest in governance capabilities reduce enforcement risk and operational disruption. Responsible AI governance supports trust, resilience, and long-term value creation. Organizations that integrate regulatory expectations into everyday AI practices are better positioned to operate confidently in an increasingly regulated AI landscape. This knowledge provides you with a strong foundation to aid you in the future, whether you apply it in your current role, pursue further study, or contribute to shaping responsible AI in your organization. By staying informed and engaged, you will play a vital role in ensuring AI develops in ways that are safe, ethical, and beneficial for society. Thank you for your time and your commitment to this learning journey. We encourage you to keep exploring and keep building toward a future where artificial intelligence serves the needs of humanity responsibly.